Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining. My name is Maital Weiss. I'm a Director of Business Development at the FreeMind Group. And today we'll be talking about the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, or the Cdmrp. And I'll just start by briefly talking about FreeMind. We've been around for about 20 years now. We have over 70 full-time employees and a very diverse client base: academics, university medical centers, and independent research institutes. We also do a lot of work with the industry, anything from very early stage companies all the way up to the big guys. We submit around 500 applications every year on behalf of our client base and help them win about $100 million in awards. And when we talk about non-dilutive funding, we have to consider the entire landscape. So all in all, we're typically talking about around $50 billion that are allocated annually. And most of them definitely come from within the NIH. But a lot of those come from other HHS organizations: BARDA, FDA, CDC, the National Science Foundation, and definitely the Department of Defense. And within the Department of Defense, there are quite a few names or acronyms worth mentioning. But today, we'll mostly be talking about the Cdmrp, the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. Of course, there are private foundations as well: the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, JDRF, and definitely many more. But it is important to remember that one of the reasons that we are so focused on non-dilutive funding is the fact that $1 won through these mechanisms is worth much more than $1. The Milken Institute actually checked, and they saw that for every $1 a company raises from the public sector, they are then likely to win $8.38 from the private sector within the next 8 years or so. And additionally, this is a pretty significant investment from the US government. Apparently, for every $1 they spend, they get 2.3 in economic growth. So all in all, we think this is a win-win. Another interesting fact is that historically, 50% of all FDA-approved drugs received government funding during some course of the R&D, making this a very important indication for investors to know what will happen to the company in the future. And when we look at the funding landscape and the different type of projects that these agencies fund, they are definitely there to cover the entire thing from discovery all the way up to stage 3 clinical trials. And when we look at the size of awards, typically they start with $200,000 to $500,000. More advanced stages, still preclinical, early stage clinical, typically are capped with $500,000 up to about $3 million in awards. But you have to remember that larger programs, obviously phase 3 clinical trials, will not go very far with $500,000. So there are definitely mechanisms out there to help you as the investigator, as the CEO, do work in every stage of development. But if you take a closer look at these 3 areas, you'll see that the Cdmrps are there with all of them. And this makes the Cdmrp very important for many different types of indications, many different types of stages of development. And that's what we'll mostly be talking about today. So the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs evolved as a mechanism for Congress to basically allocate funds for research on specific diseases. They're organizing programs for specific indications. They have focus areas that can and do change every year. And the review process is modeled on the NIH's review process, but it is different, and we'll touch upon the differences as well. And one of the great advantages of working with the DoD is that they also allow for expedited review processes. So the idea is to not leave you hanging, to be as helpful as they can, and frankly, they do a great job. And another very important element is that non-US entities are eligible as well. These grants are not location-based, they're not politics-based, they're not even company-based. Most of what they will look at is the science. So if there's an amazing project coming from Europe, coming from Australia, that is definitely something that they'll be happy to take a look at. And unlike mechanisms that say foreign entities are eligible and then nothing happens, they actually mean it. They fund a lot of work overseas. So if you're not an SBIR eligible company, that does not mean that you cannot submit these grants. In terms of the Cdmrp's mission, is to eradicate diseases and support the war fighter. And they definitely do a lot of work with combat-related indications, but it is important to remember with the Cdmrp that they also take care of veterans and their family members. So even if we're talking about something that has nothing to do with the battlefield, it might be very relevant to the Cdmrps. And I mentioned that the review process is a little different compared to the NIH's one. So let me walk you through the main bullets here. The first thing you do when you want to submit a Cdmrp is to submit a pre-application. That is a very short document detailing what it is that you would like to do. Some mechanisms within the Cdmrp will not even ask you how much money you want, because the idea is just to take a look at the projects and then go into the details if they're interested. It is typically limited to a few pages. And it is important to note that most of the applications do not make it past the pre-application stage, making it a very, very important element in the review process. And if you're not invited to submit the full application, you are definitely done with that cycle. But on the other end, if you are invited, if they are interested to hear more, that just increases your chances dramatically. So make sure that you are very carefully crafting your pre-application, ensuring that the science is well presented and represented, and that you meet the guidelines and the specifications of the solicitation. So to come back to the review process itself, we'll start with the pre-application stage. That is then reviewed, and then only if they're interested, you're invited to submit the full application. The full application is then reviewed again, and then hopefully you are awarded. So within the Cdmrps, there are many different award mechanisms. They do vary from different programs and different indications, and the budgets definitely vary as well, but they do have a standard range. And just a few example award types. So firstly, we have the Discovery or Concept Awards, typically range from $100,000 to $200,000. We have the Idea Awards that typically begin with $350,000 all the way up to about $600,000. An Impact Award, and obviously we'll talk about these in a minute. I just wanted to have a summary slide. Typically around $1 million. Next one is the Technology or Therapeutic Development Awards that typically range from $1 to $3 million. And the Clinical Trial Awards that can reach all the way up to $10 million, and some of them don't even have a budget cap. I use this dramatic pause to take a sip of water. I'm sorry. Okay, so all these programs could be found within the Cdmrp website. You can see the link at the top of the screen. Bear in mind that in order to get to that website, you need to have a US IP address. So if you're doing it from outside the US, you can definitely just use a VPN or look at grants.gov or EBRAP. And you'll have all the opportunities there. And these are the topics of the Cdmrps for 2019. If you sum them all up together, you'll see that they get to more than $1 billion. And I'll give you a second to look at them as well and see if you're within the list. Okay, so just a few things that I would like to mention here. So as you can see, some of them are very well known: Alzheimer's disease, autism. Some programs are very small, relatively, of course. For example, lupus was allocated $5 million. That should not discourage anyone from submitting. There are many awardees, and if your project is perfect, it doesn't matter how much money the agency has. And if you'll take a look at, for example, the prostate cancer program, the breast cancer program, and the peer-reviewed medical program, you'll see that some of them have very significant budgets. You can see the link below the list. First of all, that is accessible to anyone from outside the US as well. And also it just, it has all the solicitations and everything that I'll be saying about the topics. So they announced the topics, but in terms of the deadlines and the details, most of them were actually not announced yet. And I'll even share with you that we had a discussion and we were considering postponing this webinar a bit to make sure that we're able to talk about a bit more in terms of the deadlines. But we actually decided to go ahead with this date because the ones that were announced have deadlines that are definitely right around the corner. So these are the programs that were announced: alcohol and substance abuse disorders, breast cancer, Joy Wolfer medical research program, ovarian cancer, pre-reviewed medical. And well, just a few minutes ago, the peer-reviewed cancer program was just pre-announced. So again, very exciting. No further information at this point. But still today, we'll be talking mostly about the peer-reviewed medical. And as you can see, it is the largest program they have, $350 million. And the deadlines are March 14 or 28, depending on the specific mechanism. And we'll go into that in a minute. So within the peer-reviewed medical research programs, you can see that there are definitely many different indications. Some of them are very, very familiar, very, very significant. For example, we have diabetes, lung injury, and obviously the list goes on and on. Some of them are not as big as, for example, diabetes. For example, they have Rett syndrome. And the great thing about the peer-reviewed medical research programs is that there are new indications every year, obviously with respect to what Congress decided to have on the list. But it is great because maybe even if one year you're not included within the list, next year you'll see that you are. So yeah, that's the list. Of course, you'll have the PowerPoint when we're done here. And as we dive into the PRMRP, we'll be talking about 5 award mechanisms: the Discovery Award, the Clinical Trial Award, the Focus Program Award that we will actually not be going into because it is very specific or focused, if you will. I'll be happy to share some more information if needed. We have the Investigator-Initiated Research Award, and we have the Technology or Therapeutic Development Award. So let's talk about each one of those for a minute. So firstly, the Discovery Award. We're talking about funding up to $200,000. And the scope is to support very, very early stage work. And they'll even, that they're emphasizing this, support the exploration of a highly innovative new concept or untested theory. They do not intend to support the logical progression of an already established line of questioning, meaning high risk, high reward. That's what they want to do. And if you have a program that sounds like a wonderful idea, but you have no idea if it actually works in reality, this is the opportunity for you. The deadlines for this opportunity are just there on your right. You can see that the pre-application is due March 28th, so still enough time. And the full application is due April 11th. So it is a bit tight. But again, this is a wonderful mechanism. Second one is the Investigator-Initiated Research Award. As you can see, the awards are typically up to $1.2 million or 1.5 if you are submitting this as a collaboration. They definitely allow partnering PI, meaning if you're doing this as a part of a consortium, if this is a project that you're doing with another company, maybe academics, this is exactly what they want to do. Bear in mind that they cannot fund clinical trials with this application, so make sure that you are compliant with what they want to see. The next one is the Technology or Therapeutic Development Award. These grants are a bit bigger. We're talking up to $3 million, and the scope is the translation of promising preclinical findings into clinical applications. This is very product-oriented, and the product or products to be developed may be tangible item, for example, drugs, biologics, devices, or knowledge-based products. If you think that this is the grant for you, the deadline is March 14th, definitely coming up, and the full application is due July 10th. And last one is the Clinical Trial Award. I'll let you guess what they fund. There is no budget cap, but when you see that written down in a solicitation, it doesn't mean that you can ask for $100 million. You could, but I would definitely recommend looking up the average award size, just understanding what it is that you want to do and what it is that they want to fund. The average here is around $6 million. Obviously, you can ask for more, but make sure that you understand what they want to do. So in this case, they want to see implementation of clinical trials of novel interpretations with the potential to have a significant impact on patient care. Proposed projects can range from small proof of concept trials all the way up to very late ones. Please read this solicitation very carefully before obviously naming your price and getting to work, to make sure that you are giving them what they want to see. And as I mentioned, many of these were not announced. So as I was building this presentation, I just added the 2018 topics because most of them will probably be announced as a part of the new solicitation as well. But as that was happening, we just got an email now saying that they announced the pre-announcements literally right now. We're talking about 30 minutes ago. So I would definitely use that link and look it up if it is relevant to you. If you would like me to send you a link, you can just shoot me an email and I'll make sure to share that with you as soon as we have more information. In terms of the mechanisms themselves, and I was advised by the Chief Clinical Strategist of FreeMind, Guy Harchin, to use these opportunities because we anticipate that we'll see them again this year. The first one is the IDEA Award with special focus, up to $400,000, supports innovative, untested, high-risk, potentially high-reward concepts, theories, paradigms, and methods in cancer research. And they definitely want you to not give them a project that is halfway done. They would like to fund the very, very risky projects. That's their goal. Second one is the impact award. We're talking about projects that are up to $1 million. They support hypothesis-driven, high-impact research. The potential impact of the proposed research is expected to be near-term, and it may be significant and go beyond an exponential advance. And here, obviously, clinical trials are definitely allowed. So just before we zoom out again to these type of opportunities, I would like to talk a bit about Cdmrp submission tips. Because even if you've done this before with the NIH, some things are, of course, similar, but some things are very different. So firstly, read the solicitation very carefully. They are very, very good at explaining exactly what they want to see. They even have an acronym section at the back, and they'll explain things like PDF even. So make sure that you're taking the time and looking at what it is that they want to do. You have to choose the right topic and the right funding opportunity. And remember, the pre-application is a critical part of that process. Make sure your team is registered ahead of time. Although with the pre-application, you do not always need a full registration. And again, look at the solicitations, please. They'll explain everything very clearly. And keep track of the key dates. For example, we talked about some being early March, some being April. With some topics, specific funding opportunities will have one deadline and others will have another one. So make sure that you're not confusing the two, because as I mentioned initially, this only comes out once a year. And another thing that I would like to mention is that compared to other funding agencies, the Cdmrp and the DoD expect you to be fairly independent. So they do not have, hotlines, no specific program officer per specific indication. And we definitely recommend starting as earlier as you can to make sure that a technicality is not the thing standing in your way. And in terms of incorporating these type of opportunities and these types of funding into your corporate strategy, we understand that most of the money you'll probably raise will come from equity, angels, VCs, maybe even IPOs, but you cannot disregard the non-dilutive funding component, both because they come with no strings attached, very science-based, and the impact these grants have on a company when investors take a meeting is very, very significant. So definitely make sure that you're looking into these opportunities as well. In terms of being successful, we find that there are a few ways to maximize your chances of award. And obviously the goal here is to lower the risk. I know that we think about a grant as a scientific document, but a grant is mostly a marketing document. It goes through a risk assessment process as any investor would. And you have to make sure that the application is very, very strong. You have to seek insights into the interests and goals of the funding agencies. However, make sure that you're not giving them what they want to see and not what you want to do. If these grants do not correlate with your granting strategy and your corporate strategy, it will be very problematic because you'll be stuck doing a project that does not get you anywhere, might be holding you back, and is just a burden. Our advice is to not give up, is to just dig deeper, because these funding opportunities are all over. Their scope is huge within the DoD and out. You have to also know the weaknesses of your team and find partners if necessary. I don't know if you remember, but one of these opportunities actually calls for getting a partner if needed. It's fine. It does not make you look weak. It just makes you look more aware. If they're looking at a person being able to lead the project, they want someone very much with a very clear understanding of what they can do and where they need to get help. You have to identify all the relevant funding opportunities before you start, because submitting a grant that you're kind of eligible to submit when there's one out there that might be much better is definitely a very frustrating experience. And lastly, of course, plan and execute a long-term multi-submission granting strategy. Don't just submit one application, submit multiple applications, submit them again, submit to DoD ones, submit to NIH ones. Find the private foundation that helps fund the orphan indication that you're going after. And just make sure that you are making this a priority. In terms of how we in FreeMind structure the process of grant submission, in order, of course, to help you maximize your funding potential, is to, first of all, again, identify all the relevant funding opportunities. I know I just said that, but you have no idea how important it is. You have to create a multi-submission granting strategy and then submit as many applications as you can, but make sure that they are top quality. If you're submitting a lot of applications, but they are not competitive, you have just wasted your time, and it will not get you very far. So this is me. Thank you so much for your time. And let me see, I see that we have questions. Just a minute. Okay. When will the rest of the solicitations be announced? So firstly, many of them will start coming out in the next month or so. As you can see, one was just announced today. Another one was announced a couple weeks ago. So this is definitely the time to refresh your eBRAP page and see if there are new things out there that could be relevant to you. And maybe just one more before our time is up. Is this something that an academic can submit? Absolutely. So I know that we talked mostly about the industry, but there are definitely programs out there for academics, mostly targeted academics. So definitely just browse through the applications and you'll see that they even say this should be submitted by a postdoc. And they have many different types of programs. Again, just go and log into eBRAP, log into the Cdmrp website and look it up. Okay, so yeah, Parkinson's disease. So I got a question. I saw that Parkinson's disease is not listed in the funding opportunities for 2019. Is this true? And I thought it was a big funding priority. It actually was. And we were surprised as well. They typically have neurodegenerative diseases, sometimes even as a separate topic, sometimes as a part of some of the peer-reviewed indications. And yeah, it is absent this year. It was very widely all over the Cdmrp topic list last year and the years before. And yeah, I don't think they'll be funding Parkinson's related projects this year, but you can definitely find many Parkinson's related opportunities within the NIH's website. So even if the Cdmrps are not the right opportunities for you this year, I would definitely consider revisiting next year. Okay, in the collaborative program, are there rules about how the sum is divided? No, they do have some regulations, but you have to look at the specific programs. If you want, you can definitely email me and I'll send you the document that just has all of these guidelines. And one last question. Where do you register to be able to submit the proposals? Okay, so you have to log into the eBRAP system. You can find the link, or you can just look up eBRAP. And within the documents for each one of these applications, you'll see a very, very detailed tutorial walking through all the different stages of the process. If you have any trouble with that, again, shoot me an email. That's why it's there, and we'll be very happy to help. So I think this is all the time we have. Thank you very much for taking the time and participating. And I know there are many questions. I'll email all of you personally and try and answer those as well. If you enjoyed this very much and you would like to see more webinars and more information, we have a surprisingly active YouTube channel. You'll also see presentations from our event in JP Morgan with many of the industry program officers. We also have a LinkedIn page and a Twitter account and a Facebook group, I think. So thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful, wonderful day.